Alan introduce our speaker for the evening, and after the speaker has told the story, there will be time for questions, and then after the questions, we still have a short business meeting, not too long, but the focus is on our speaker, Deepi, who I welcomed earlier on again. I want to officially welcome her to the group here, and we all look forward to hearing from you. And I'll first of all let Alan do the introduction. Alan, go ahead.
Thank you, Joe. I'm going to keep the bio very short because a lot of the talking points that she'll cover tonight really cover her background and history. But most of us know Deepi as one of the hosts of the Saturday night game show on Channel 13 called, I can't remember what it's called now. Texans, In-Depth Texas, something like that. But she does a lot of the media work for the Texans, but let's go ahead and let Deepi tell her how she got in this business and what she does for the Texans. So, thank you.
Well, thanks, Alan. Thanks for the introduction, and thank you all for having me. It's really my pleasure to speak to all of you tonight. When I told my kids that I was going to talk about myself for an entire meeting, they said, wow, that's probably the funnest thing that you're going to do all day. And I said, well, that's not untrue, because I was just in a 4.5-hour meeting with the Texans as we plan our 2020 season kickoff, which I'm sure that's going to come up in the Q&A, what's going to happen with football if many of you are football fans. Even if you're not football fans, I'll tell you a little bit about myself, because I actually don't have a background in journalism or sports or radio or TV, and everything I do for the Texans, I guess you could call it, I'm the team reporter. Unofficially, I'm the Texans insider. I'm the lead writer for HoustonTexans.com. Nowadays, when you cover a team, they want you to do what they call multimedia journalism, which means you do it via radio, you do TV shows, you write stories, or you shoot on a camera, or you edit sound for radio. You have to do everything because now everything's digital. So they want every single thing you do to be on every single platform. They want it on Twitter, they want it on Facebook, they want it on TV and radio. So we are, everything that I produce content-wise needs to go on all these different platforms. But part of what I do host a weekly television show, like Alan mentioned. It's called Texans Buzz. It's on Saturday nights during the season. In the off season, I'm usually just a guest co-host or a contributor on different specials. We've got a special coming up called Inspire Change. Really, it's about all the social justice initiatives that the Texans have been doing, and I'll be filming that probably next week. I've got a few interviews tomorrow with HPD, and I do stuff like that in the off season. We do a radio show every single day. Sometimes I'm on it, sometimes I'm not. With COVID, I just usually try to interview players, and I send them in and they play them throughout the hour. But in a regular season, during the regular season, a typical week, for those of you that don't know how football teams operate, it's very regimented, it's very scheduled. The Texans, they play their games, most of the games on Sundays. So a Sunday game week looks sort of like this. Sunday's the game, and I'll tell you what I do for the game. But Monday is the day after the game. It's the post game. Players get their rehab, they get their treatment. But the Bill O'Brien, the head coach, he does his press conference, and everyone wants to know, why did you lose? Or what went right in the win? Or what about this guy who got injured? Or this guy who had a phenomenal game? There's a lot of post-game breakdowns that people want questions and answers for. So that's a big part of my job on Mondays. And also we plan out the week, all the production, all the TV shows, all the radio shows, all the interviews, that planning happens on Mondays. Tuesday's a player's day off. They go out in the community, they do their community service projects. A lot of players opt to do that. For us, it's a work day. I have a 2-hour show that I host at Fuddruckers every Tuesday night. I don't know what's going to happen with that this season, but the first hour we have a Texans player come out, and we talk to him for the hour. We'll have fans ask him questions. It's really just a fun way to talk about the game and to get to know players a little better. And then the second hour, we talk about the game that happened on Sunday and sort of look ahead to the next week's game. Now, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday are our heavy practice days for players and for the team. That's when they really do the majority of their prep work. So for those days, what I do is I cover all the press conferences. I go into the locker room. We get interviews with players about their upcoming opponent. I go out to the practice field. We're not allowed to watch a lot of practice. The first year I started was in 2013, and we were able to watch the entire practice. But now with this coaching regime, we really only watch a little bit of it. So Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, radio, I shoot my TV shows. And then Saturday is our day off, or if it's an away game, it's the day that I travel on the road. So I did start this job in 2013. I guess I should start there. I started in 2013. So this is gonna be year 8 for me. And when I started this job, I actually was only supposed to write and do a little bit of radio. I have no background in TV. I did not want to be on camera. I don't like to be on camera, or at least I didn't. And then in 2014, we took all of our Texans TV programming in-house, and my boss, Mark Vandermeer, who is the play-by-play for the Texans. You may have heard him if you listen to Texans games or anything Texans. He's the voice of the Texans. He said, well, guess what? Now you're doing TV. He's just pretend like it's radio and you're looking in a little black hole of a camera, and then just talk about the Texans. So after 2014, I was also a TV contributor. But my background is in electrical engineering. I went to Purdue. I have an MBA from the University of Houston. My dad was a civil engineer. My husband's a civil engineer. My father-in-law is a civil engineer. I come from a family of engineers, because if you're Indian, your parents usually want you to go to med school or become an engineer, maybe pharmacy. But my dad definitely wanted me to do engineering. So I got my electrical engineering degree from Purdue, but I had always loved radio, and I always loved football. I'd been watching football since maybe 4 or 5 years old. And I grew up in Indianapolis, where there was no football team. So I used to watch Joe Montana and the 49ers. Everyone liked the Cowboys or the 49ers in the 80s. And I just picked the 49ers, and I had a crush on Joe Montana. So that was it. And then around 3rd or 4th grade, the Colts moved in a Mayflower truck from Baltimore to Indianapolis. And then I knew what it was like to be a real sports fan with your heart broken year after year after year, because they were just awful. They were so bad. They only got, the Indianapolis Colts only got good after I left Indianapolis. So I feel like they can thank me. So that's a little bit of my background about watching sports. My dad came from India. He played sports in India. So the reason why he liked watching sports was because when he'd go to the office on Monday, everybody would be talking about the game, and they don't have American football in India. So he wanted to be a part of the conversation. So he would watch football all day on Sunday. And as a little girl, I would just watch with him. And I think I watched a lot of sports growing up. I watched NBA. We didn't really have a baseball team, but I knew what baseball was. I watched it here and there, but football was really my first love. And I loved radio. My high school had a radio station, and I just did it for fun. But I found that even throughout my career in doing engineering and having kids, I always would find a way to get on the radio. So I don't know if you've heard of a station called KPFT Pacifica here in Houston, 90.1. I pitched myself there to do an Indian radio show, Indian radio music program back in 2001. And I knew how to run a radio board, so they put me on. And I worked for free doing a radio show for 11, 12 years. It's still on. It's called Generation Radio. It's on Thursdays. I'm no longer a part of it, but I definitely support that station and those guys, because that really allowed me to continue my passion for radio. And, I wrote freelance on the side. I had no aspirations to be a writer, and that's a big part of what I do now. So I did all these things just so I could make money and talk for a living, because that's really, I felt like that was what I wanted to do. That was, as my parents tell me, that's my true talent, is just to talk and talk and talk all day long. And I thought if I could just make money, I would be so rich. Well, football doesn't pay that much, but I am really enjoying it. This is year 8 for me. And if there is a season, I'll get to see my last 2 stadiums in the NFL. So I'll have seen all 32 stadiums, which I'm super excited about. But anyway, game days on Sundays. That's my favorite day of the week. On road trips, I travel with the team. So the team charters a plane, and I get to fly with them. That's probably the most exciting part of my job, is to have a police escort to the airport, get off the tarmac, get escorted to the hotel, get escorted to the stadium, walk in with the players, and get to do a pregame show from the field. It used to be on Fox Sports Southwest. Now it's moved to all social media platforms. And then we cover, we show a lot of fans, if you're watching a game and it's not a primetime game, you don't get to see the pregame warm-ups or the team. So we let them see the practice or the pregame warmups for themselves. We like to bring the Texans to them. So I'm sort of the eyes and ears for fans. And, I really enjoy what I do. I enjoy talking about football. I think my favorite part is really interviewing the players, which I get to do. And I'll get into that in a little bit. But as far as the pregame show, once that ends, I wrap up, I run up to the press box, and then I watch the entire game from probably the worst seat in the stadium in most places, which is the press box. It's super high up. I used to bring binoculars. Now I don't even bother anymore. I just try to listen to the radio broadcast while I'm watching if I miss something. But I write stories about the game as we're going on. If there's a major play or something big happens, I'll write stories. And then after the game, we run with all of our equipment back down to the locker room, and we get player reactions, and we cover the press conferences. The head coach, a lot of times you'll hear that on the radio or see it on TV. I'm there, and then I gather all the quotes and try to get a reaction, like a quick reaction of what went well and what went wrong, or some big plays in the game, what transpired in the players' minds, if whatever they can share for us. And then I end up writing a story, or multiple stories, I should say, after the game. Just so I think fans they see the score and they watch the game, but they like to see what the players thought of the game. They want to see what the coach thought of the game. And so we try to bring that to the fans as quickly as possible. So that's my game day Sunday. It's like, it's funny because people will always try to invite me places. Like if it's a noon game, they'll try to invite me to dinner. And I think that's one of the biggest misconceptions. It's a really long day. Like I'm there 4 hours before kickoff, and I'm there for many hours afterwards. It's a full day, but we don't really get any days off during the season. And but I enjoy it. I think everyone in their life should work a job that they absolutely hate, like really, really hate, because then when you get a job that you like, even when your days are long and hard, you will still appreciate that job. Because I as working as an engineer, I was pretty miserable, and I think a lot of people would love to have that job. I'm getting some questions in here, so I'm gonna try to answer them as I go. I do report to the broadcasting group. My boss is Mark Vandermeer. So I guess you could call it's the digital department now, because under Mark is the radio department, the TV department, the website, social media, and what I do fits into all those buckets. So I couldn't report to any one person. I just have to report to the person that has everything in their umbrella. And I like it that way. In fact, every year when I would have my annual review with Mark, for the first, I think 4 or 5 years, I would say, what is my place? Like, what do I do? I'm not the radio person, because the play-by-play guy and the color guy and the sideline guy, those are the radio guys. And I said, I'm not the TV guy, because Drew Doherty, my counterpart, he hosts most of the shows, and you'll see him in stadium during halftime. I usually cover for him, but he's the TV guy. I said, I write stories, but is that what I do? Because I'm not really a writer. But I think I've discovered that what I do is my brand. My brand is called The Deep Slant. That's my Twitter handle. That's my way of my perspective of the team as I see it. It's also a play on words, because the deep slant is also a route that players can run. So I'm actually coincidentally the only person in the department that is sponsored. Like everything I do is sponsored by Xfinity. Xfinity picked me up like 2 years ago, and they want their name on everything I do. So I felt like that was a big win for me, because all these years of wondering like what it is I do, and do people even like what I do? Because I bring my own perspective to the game. I'm not going to break down X's and O's the way some of the other guys do, but I can show them a side of football and a side of the players they may not have seen. And the players do open up, I think, a little bit more with me because I am female. So they let their guard down a little bit, and we can have fun conversations about shopping and about families and growing up and hardships. So I would say that, I have really found my niche, but it has been 8 years. So it took a little while. I think someone asked a little while ago what my parents thought about me leaving the family business. My parents didn't have a family business. My dad worked for the state of Indiana, the highway department, as a civil engineer. My husband has a family business, and they had been trying to get me to work for their family business for many, many years. And I just was like, it's like 4 people in an office. I will drive you all crazy because I need to talk. And also, I just needed to do my own thing. So my in-laws, I think they're still not giving up hope that I may quit and join their family business one day. But my my dad, who was the biggest supporter of me going to engineering, in fact, he said, you can pick whatever major you want. You can pick electrical engineering, you can pick mechanical engineering, you can pick civil engineering. He really wanted me to do engineering. He reads like all my stuff, and he's really supportive. And I think my parents, they knew that when I was 14, 15 doing radio for my high school, that I was really good at it, and I liked it, and it didn't feel like work. And they discouraged me from going into radio broadcasting because I was offered a scholarship to Butler in broadcasting, and they told me, don't take it because you will never get a job in radio, because back then nobody was hiring women in sports. And you know what, if I don't get to your questions, ask them at the end, because I'm seeing the chat pop up, but then it kind of goes away very quickly. But I'll definitely get to all your questions. So, you know, my parents were not surprised when I went into radio, and they knew, they'd listened to me, but they just were trying to be very practical and pragmatic. Like, engineering, you're going to get a job. You will make good money. You will not starve. Radio, we don't know what's going to happen to you. So I think they're very happy that I have found what I love to do, and that my husband is very supportive of it. I think that was very important to them, because I thought, well, you're in a locker room and you're covering players. Like, is he okay with this? And my husband like couldn't be more fine with it. In fact, when I was interviewing for this job in 2013, it was such a long shot for me to even get this job. I was, I guess I should tell you how I even got into the pool of applicants for this job. Well, in my early years of moving to Houston, I worked for Texas Instruments in Stafford, which many of you are probably familiar with. And I worked in the semiconductor division. I was in DSP marketing. DSPs were digital signal processors. It was like the cutting edge technology. I did that, and I hated it every day. I was just like, I remember we went through rounds of layoffs, and I was like, please just lay me off. Like, I just don't want to come to work. And I never got laid off. So, you know, it was just like, I felt awful for even wishing it, but I did quit and go back and get my MBA, because I just did not want to be in engineering. I thought maybe I'll do marketing or something more interesting, because I liked marketing. I just didn't like the engineering part of it. So I went back to school, and I got my MBA, and then I ended up having kids. So with kids, obviously I couldn't go back to work. I did some freelance writing. I did my radio show with KPFT. And then after we have three kids, 3 boys. And after my third was born, I think that was the tipping point. I was like, I have to go back to work. They're going to all be in school soon, and I need to get my career started, because otherwise I will never be able to make it. And I think that's when I decided, if I'm going to go back to work and leave my kids, I want it to be something that I really love to do. I don't want to go to work and be miserable. So I was just I would talk to people at the gym. I would talk to my friends. I was just, like, what should I do? I don't want to do engineering. Like, is radio just a long shot? Like, I've always done it. And then one of my co-hosts at KPFT said, you've actually been doing radio longer than you're doing engineering, so don't sell yourself short. And that really resonated with me. So I went back and I got an internship. I went back to U of H as a post-baccalaureate student after getting my MBA, on just the hopes of, if I enroll in a junior level communications class, will they let me do an internship? And they did. They let me do an internship with CBS Radio, which is now Intercom Radio, and they have Sports Radio 610, they have the Mix 96.5, and a bunch of stations on the floor. And I thought, I'll do an internship there, and after a semester, maybe I just need to get my foot in the door, and someone will see that I just want to work hard, and I'll just do whatever it takes. I just want to be in a radio station. So I got an internship with Sports Radio 610. I worked on their afternoon show with Josh Innes and Rich Lord. It was the JNR show. And I would write stuff on the side, and they ended up offering me a writing position maybe like 6 months after my internship ended. And my internship was like getting coffee, putting paper in the printer. It was like all sorts of stuff, but I was so excited to do it, and people would give me extra tasks to do, and I would just happily do it. It was only part-time. And afterwards, I think they remembered that, and they hired me to be a writer and to do some on-air stuff. And I never quite made it on air because I was a woman. I had to sort of establish myself. And in that period, Mark Vandermeer was the morning talk show host at the time. He was still doing the Texans play-by-play. And he and I had run into each other a few times and just chatted. And he knew I wrote. He knew I loved to do radio. And our paths crossed again then in 2013. I was covering the NFL draft for the Texans. I was actually only supposed to be a backup. I was only supposed to be helping Robert Hensley. And at the time, there was a woman who was the editor of Sports Radio 610's website. Well, she ends up getting fired, coincidentally, the day of the draft. And Robert looks at me and says, you're the only writer we have for the draft. So you're just going to have to write about every single pick. And I was terrified because I wasn't prepared to do it. But I have a really good way of acting like I know what I'm doing when I don't know what I'm doing. So I wrote every single story about all the picks. I was exhausted. And that was the year we picked DeAndre Hopkins in the first round. So I had my first experience with covering press conferences. He brought his mom there, and I would write a story about each pick, and then I would try to wrap up the quotes and put them in the story and get them out. And I mean, I just tried to do the best I could. I didn't know if I was doing a good job or a horrible job. But then about a month later, I get a call from Mark, and he said, I have this position that I want you to apply for. And I think he thought I had a lot more experience than I did because I was working at a radio station, and I came in for the interview, and he said, wow, I had like no idea you were so green, i.e. you have like no experience. And I remember at that point thinking, I'm not going to get this job. And I was really heartbroken because reading about this job, I thought this is what I was meant to do. And I think someone's going to beat me that has a lot more experience, because there were people from the Lakers, from the Associated Press, from, you know, all over the NFL that were applying for this job, people that were established, and then me. And so I did my interview with Mark, and I just sort of like threw all caution to the wind and said, I'm just gonna be myself. And he said, let's go down to the radio studio. Let's do a fake interview where you interview me. And I think my interviewing skills were the thing that really sold him, because I interviewed him, and it was exactly, I guess, what he wanted. And he didn't tell me until a couple weeks later, because they went on a week-long vacation. The entire company shuts down for a week. So I had to like sweat it out for 2 weeks. And then he called me back in 2013, about 2 weeks later. I thought I was going to have to do another interview, but he said, we want you to take the job. And I think it's, aside from the birth of my kids and my wedding, it was the happiest I've ever been, because I was born to do this. And this year will be my 8th season, like I said. But, you know, for years, and I still have this feeling of when I walk around NRG Stadium, because I work out of the stadium, I'll be in the cafeteria, and JJ Watt will be getting his tray of food next to me. And I'll just be like, how did I end up here? Like, I am getting lunch next to JJ Watt. He's a guy I watched on TV, and I was a stay-at-home mom with 3 kids. And now I am like, he's like, hey, DP. I'm like, hey, JJ. I mean, this is like a bizarro world. But people ask me, does it ever get old? It never gets old. I love talking about my job, as you can tell. I love what I do, because it's something that I just didn't think was ever a possibility for me. But, you know, making the career change after having 3 kids, I would recommend it to everybody if you can do it. At least work towards your passion in whatever capacity you can. If you have to keep a full-time job and chip away at it, that would be my advice. I know many of you are probably like, we're not going to make a career change. We're retired, but you never know. I don't think it's ever too late to start a career change. And let's see. Okay, so 2013 was my first year, and I learned a lot of lessons. That was the year, many of you remember, the team went 2-14. They won their first 2 games, and then they lost the next 14, which was awful for everybody. But it wasn't awful for me, because I learned a lot in those losses. And I learned that, and in people being so upset about the team losing, they didn't really notice that I was new. So I just had so much enthusiasm for covering the sport. And I had a lot of Twitter haters in the beginning. I had a lot of people saying, who are you and where did you come from and why do you deserve this job? And that was very hard for me at first. And I think Mark did a really good job of, before I started, he told me, he said, you belong here. Just remember that. And I didn't know why he said that, but then I feel like when some of that social media negativity came through, I had to remind myself of that. And actually with losing, people were more mad at the team and Gary Kubiak than they were ever mad at me. So that all went away very quickly. And then, you know, by the end of the year, everybody got fired and we had a new coaching staff. And then it felt like everybody was in new territory, not just me. Everybody was starting over with a brand new coach and coaching staff doesn't know me, doesn't know anyone else from me. For all they know, I could have been here 100 years. And I think that's when I really gained my confidence, because I thought, now we're all the same. I didn't like that the previous coaching staff had a better relationship with some of these outside reporters than me. And now I felt like we all know each other the same. And I was working in the building, so I was able to cultivate those relationships a lot easier and a lot quicker, especially with the coaching staff that comes from the New England Patriots. They're not super easy to get to know. But, being in the building certainly helped me gain some face time and for them to know who I was and know what I was about. Also, I should mention the first year that I was doing this, like a month into my job, NBC called me and said they wanted to shadow women that cover football, which I was like, I've been doing this for like a month. This is so offensive to the people I work with that have been doing this for like 20 years. So I was very embarrassed, but excited at the same time. And so an NBC crew came in and followed me for the day. Well, they said, what do you do in a typical day? And I said, I go to practice, I sit at my desk and write stories, nothing super exciting. So they took some B-roll of me. B-roll is, just footage of me at my desk typing, super exciting. I was editing photos. And the most exciting thing that I had planned that day was a player interview. And I was interviewing Brian Cushing. And Brian Cushing is a linebacker, or used to be a linebacker for the Texans. Really crazy, just like super like amped up all the time. He's on our strength and conditioning staff now, which is perfect for him. And he was known to give reporters the slip, meaning he would say he was going to do an interview, but then he would sneak out the back door and you would just never see him again. And he would just say sorry the next time. And I was so terrified that I've got this NBC crew following me and he's in the weight room and he's going to sneak out. So I just camped outside the weight room like a total stalker until he was done. And we went in and we did the interview. And I had all these people watching me for what was my first big interview. And it could not have gone better. I had my boss, I had like the PR staff, I had camera people, I had the NBC host there. It was me, it was Brian. And, he gave a great interview. We talked about football. We talked about him becoming a dad. He talked about how he likes to go tanning because he's from New Jersey, which players don't open up, tough guy players don't open up like that apparently, like they do with me. So it was really funny and it was a fun interview. And I got to be on NBC Nightly News like 2 weeks later, which was pretty hilarious considering they're like, oh, women that work in sports. And I would just laugh like, well, at least for a few weeks, I work in sports. I'm not, let's see if this gig even lasts. They might think the jig is up after a year and just fire me, which is always something that I still am terrified to this day when I get called into Mark's office. I feel like I'm going to get fired for something, which he thinks is ridiculous. But the HEB president, Scott McClellan, once said, if you don't feel like nervous for your job every single day, then, maybe something's not right. You're losing a little bit of your passion. I'm paraphrasing, but basically that you should, want to work hard so much that fear should always be, you should never get too comfortable in what you do, that you just feel like you can just mail it in and no one's going to do anything to you. Let's see what else. I don't know. I feel like I've covered so much and I'm talking, and I think a lot of you have questions. Do y'all want to move into the question portion of it? Because I think questions have been popping up. Joe, Alan, is that?
Go ahead, Deepi. Why don't you start looking at the questions which came in and try to answer them?
Okay, Mark says nice haircut, and I want to say this is how I got this gig is because Alan's daughter Shara cuts my hair and my entire family's hair, and I have referred so many people to her. So she's been cutting my hair since long before I was working for the Texans. Thank you.
So my adult son who's with me, Shara, was his babysitter.
Oh,
Shara Lipman. So that's why yes. I had the inside scoop as to the haircut question. So thanks for the plug.
Yes, go to Shara. She's I refer everybody to her, but I'm like, hey, but schedule your appointments in advance. But Shara's cool with me because she knows my schedule's kind of crazy. So she always does her best to squeeze me in. Okay, let's see. I've heard that from Lawrence, I've heard that player comments are coach prepared controlled. Is this correct? It depends on the coaching staff. I didn't notice it as much my first year. I think players were very free to say what they wanted to say, but this coaching staff really likes to have a cohesive message going out. So one of their big things is you don't talk about another player's performance. You don't talk about like, oh, this guy, unless it's good, I guess the veterans can talk about JJ Watt having a phenomenal game, but you can't talk about somebody having a poor game. You can't really talk about, anything trash talking or anything to incite the other team. Nothing that gives away any of the game plan. They don't really like players talking about injuries. there's a lot of rules, and you can tell when a rookie comes in, they have so much personality. Then after about a week of rookie minicamp, they come out and, you know, it's a standard response of, you ask them about their college career. That was in the past. I'm just trying to make the team. I'm just trying to get better every day. Just trying to get 1% better every day. Everything's super vague and super boring. And then they quickly realize that the media realizes that this person's not worth talking to because they're just giving us the same answers as everyone else. But yeah, it's pretty controlled. I think Bill O'Brien, he comes from the Patriots. And if you've seen Bill Belichick's press conferences, he talks a lot, but says very little. And I think they don't want to give any unnecessary competitive advantage to any other team by spilling the beans too much. And they can't control what every player says in the locker room. So they try to have talking points, you know, and how to address certain questions. So I guess you could say yes. All right. My sister is DFO. I don't know what DFO is. Someone want to chime in here? For a D1 college team, and has told me horror stories about how women are treated in football. Have you had difficulties in that area?
Director of Football Ops.
Director of Football Ops. Okay. Actually, there was an article today in the Washington Post about Dan Snyder, the owner of Washington. They're not the Redskins anymore, the Washington team, and these the men and the culture that they have. That's very disrespectful towards women. A lot of sexual harassment stories. I have heard these stories too. Luckily, I have not experienced that in the Texans organization. I have not. I think if it was the case, I would not be able to be there for 7 years. I would have left because I'm not like trying to get my career off the ground. I mean, I'm married. I've got 3 kids. If it doesn't work out, like I don't need to put up with sexual harassment. So I have not experienced it, but I do think that it really just depends on ownership, and it depends on who's running your team. And I think the McNair family, you know, I knew Bob McNair here and there. I mean, obviously towards the end, his health was not that great, so I didn't really get a chance to spend a whole lot of time with him, but he wanted an organization that felt like family, that was very much a family atmosphere, and everybody felt very comfortable. And, you know, he hired people that sort of carried that out. So, and Cal, his son, who's now, you know, owner of the team, and Hannah's in the building a lot. You know, it's very much a family. They have 4 small kids. You know, he's got 3 kids from his previous marriage. It's very much a family atmosphere. And I feel so thankful that I have not had to deal with anything like that. Cause I do think it's very prevalent in sports, and even especially in the NFL. I mean, there are teams that definitely have it. I've not experienced it. Okay, 2020, players planning to kneel for the national anthem, adding a black anthem, and now players making anti-Semitic tweets that seem mostly ignored by the league. We like you, but what do you say to this group who are Jewish and mainly conservative? Okay, there was one player that made anti-Semitic tweets, Deshaun Jackson from the Eagles, and I think he's been reprimanded. I don't really know why he said what he said, and I feel like a lot of the Jewish players in the league stood up and said something to him about that, because I don't think that just because you're for a Black Lives Matter movement that you can say something negative against another minority. I mean, I'm Indian, so you know, I feel like as a minority, we really have to look out for each other, and it doesn't mean tearing another group down. So, you know, I personally, I don't agree with those comments. I think as far as the players kneeling, you know, that's been something that's, I felt like this was going to come to a head eventually, because the way the NFL dealt with it was to just force players to not kneel. And I think if all the stuff with George Floyd hadn't happened, maybe that would have been fine. But with the George Floyd, the protests, I think now, you know, people are saying, well, why didn't they do this peacefully? And the peaceful way that they wanted to protest it was by kneeling. Now, the problem is a lot of people feel very strongly that this is disrespectful towards the flag. I don't know why they play the anthem at the games to begin with. I mean, I just feel like, okay, I guess they have to play the anthem. I think making the players stay in the locker room isn't really a solution. I think if you let players kneel and express their personal opinion, I actually, like, personally speaking, I don't have a problem with it. And I've talked to a lot of these players, and you know, many of them have dealt with racism in their past, even as NFL players. In fact, I would live in Bel Air. I've lived in Bel Air a number of years. And I don't know if you all remember, there was a Black high school student that was shot. I want to say high school or college. He was shot by the police. He was innocent and he was killed. And this was, I don't know, 10 years ago or so. And I was talking to one of our players who lived in Bel Air, and he told me, he said, I was just sitting on my porch one day in the middle of the afternoon, and a cop pulled up and started asking me all sorts of questions here in Bel Air, like in my neighborhood. He said that, he said, well, this is my house, and that's why I'm sitting on this porch, because I own this house. And he said it was still like 5 or 6 questions. And he said, well, you know, if it was someone that wasn't Black, do you think they would have asked them why they were sitting on their porch? It seems so ridiculous. I've heard players getting pulled over by cops and having to sit on pavement for, you know, up to 90 minutes in this Houston heat. Even as NFL players, you know, there's been a lot of injustices, I think, towards the Black community. So, you know, I feel like it has to change. And I mean, nobody wants to see protests where people, you know, have their businesses bashed in and people getting hurt. So I feel like if peaceful protesting is how they do it, I don't really have a problem with it, because I feel like you see it in other leagues too. You see it in the NBA, and I feel like the NFL sometimes is very, you know, it's very skewed. The demographics are skewed for the fans and for the ownership. So I think it's good to have equal representation of all cultures. You know, maybe one day we'll see an Indian NFL player. I don't know. I hope that answers your question. It's a heavy topic. I don't know. I mean, I feel like that in itself could be its own discussion, but we discuss this at work all the time. It's very interesting. People have very different views on this. Albert, thank you. Says I have a great passion. A third career. Good luck on your career, Albert. Okay. Jeremy Foster says hi. Oh, if you want to contact me for speaking, just get my info from Alan afterwards. All right. So let's see. Oh, I see some questions about the season. As of today, what is happening with the season? Will we have it? I think that's the big question. Like I said, I was in a 4.5-hour meeting, and the organization, the business side and the football side, they're both planning as if we're going to have a full season full of fans, because no decision has been made yet by the NFL. And I don't know if you guys are on Twitter at all, but if you follow JJ Watt, he's part of the negotiations right now. It's the NFL negotiating with the NFLPA, the NFL Players Association, and a number of players. And I think it's coming down to money right now. Like, the players have to play a full season. So do they get paid their normal salaries, even though the stands are empty? Because it's really a big loss for a lot of the owners of these clubs to play these games with no fans. It may be cheaper for them to just not even play a game at all, because you have to, you know, pay the players, and you're not getting your advertisements or your sponsors. You're not getting the ticket sales. You're not getting concession sales. But for the players, they're still putting their lives at risk. They're playing the exact same game that they'd be playing, whether it's in a COVID-19 environment or a completely healthy environment, whether it's in an empty stand or it's a full stand. So, you know, they want to know what precautions and what testing is going to be in place for them to keep them safe, to keep their families safe. And, you know, they're at running the risk of injury, and like any other season. And now on top of that, it's a health risk too, because if they've got family members or anyone that they're trying to protect from getting COVID-19, you know, that's kind of, I think, where they're stuck right now, is on the money issue. And I don't know if we're going to have a season. I feel like we're planning for training camp starting. Deshaun Watson is supposed to, and rookies are supposed to report this week. And in the climate of Texas, I just find it so unimaginable that we're going to start camp this way in 2 weeks. Like 90 players on a roster out in the heat. I don't know how you socially distance them. I just don't. So I could see the season starting a little bit later. I think the way the schedule has been set up by the league, we could start as late as October. The first 4 weeks, no teams have a bye week. So you could just lop off those first 4 weeks of games, add them to the end, have your Super Bowl in Tampa Bay as late as February, because you don't have to schedule the Bucs Stadium for around any concerts or big tours. So I've read that stadium is available up until February 28th, I think, to do a Super Bowl. So that's one option. But I think we might have a season. I just don't think it's going to be with fans. And I just don't know what we're going to do about training camp and preseason. I just don't see players being in their own bubbles, quarantine, and then we mix them all up for preseason games. Right now we're scheduled to have 2 though. So right now no decision's been made. I feel like every day we're expecting a decision to come down, but still waiting. Okay. Will you do the cricket when it starts here in Houston? That's funny because I've gone to India and cricket's like the national sport of India. And I have watched so much cricket and I don't understand what is going on. They play for days and days and days. I'm like, is this a match? Is this a practice? Who won? The scoring's all weird. I'd be an embarrassment to the country of India and to all cricket fans if I did anything on cricket. So I will not be a part of that. Anything else? Any other questions? I think that's all the ones I see in the chat.
DP, maybe for those people who are not that good with the keyboard to type in, is there anybody who would like to ask a question? If so, unmute yourself and ask the question. No? If there are no more questions, DP, I thank you on behalf of all of us.
I've answered every question that everybody has. That's awesome.
Anybody, if you don't know how to unmute it, you want to wave and I'll unmute you. Okay, DP, again, thank you on behalf of all of us. This was very enlightening. It's a different topic for most of us for our meetings, but it was great. I really enjoyed it. We learned a lot on how the Texans work and the behind and the communication, TV and radio. Thank you very much. And who knows, maybe after it starts, we'll bring you back and then you can tell us how it went through a COVID-19 season, which will be very unique.
Yeah, I can add that to my resume. I covered a professional football team in a pandemic. We've been doing it all off season, so definitely. But thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate everyone welcoming me, and I hope it wasn't too boring. It's a lot of details if you don't like football.
Joe, can I say something?
Yes. Who is that?
Yes, go ahead, please.
I belong to Toastmasters, and I've been listening to you. I've never heard anybody speak so smoothly as you do. Really.
Oh, thank you. Like I said, my parents told me, they said, your gift is talking. And I realized that at an early age. But I actually love public speaking. So I consider that to be, I really consider that to be something that I'm very appreciative of, because I know that so many people are terrified of speaking in front of large crowds. And it's become a joke. My brother got married a few years ago in Toronto, and they had like 600 people at their reception because my sister-in-law had a big family. And they needed an MC, and I was offended that they were even considering anybody except for me. Like offended. And my brother said, but you know, she wants someone from her side too. Like it has to be one from our side. And I was like, but like I can handle it. It's fine. So she brings her cousin up there, and it was totally fine. But I always get super nervous right before. But then, you know, once I'm up there, I just really, I don't feel nervous. It's funny that I was nervous doing TV, but I think it's because I didn't have people like to look at giving me feedback. I think that's why
I was looking.
a little scarier.
I was looking very carefully.
What's that?
I was the person that asked you about speaking on the Rotary, and I'm not sure which Alan would have that telephone number. So that's part of the reason.
Lippman. Alan Lippman.
Let me pull this out. Okay. So
Gerald, hold on. Gerald, you were trying to say something at the same time when Mel was talking.
Yeah.
Jerry, go ahead.
What was I trying to say?
well, what I wanted to say was that your message to young people at our Rotary that are changing their careers or taking a chance, following what they love, and that's what that part of that message. Of course, you know, there are people that really have a great football idea and follow it and like it, like I have all my life. But at the same thing, being young, being female, and being able to address the career movements, that was the topic that I really wanted to address. And so if Alan can contact me and let me know what number to call you, so I'd like to get you online to speak to our group.
Yeah, I would love
See you
to.
later, Mel.
Okay, thank you.
I mean, I would talk about the hardships of being female, but you all are men, so I thought, I don't know if it's the right, may not be the right audience for that message. It's like, it may not resonate, but I would love to. I'd love to talk to
I did.
Has any questions about that?
I did public speaking for Navy Medicine for 6 years, and that little nervousness that you get, I found that's what gives me the energy to make my presentations so dynamic. And it was a great career, but after 6 years of being on the road every other weekend, it got a little old for me. So I took a position where I had like regular hours, and until I retired. But yeah, public speaking is the number one thing that as most people are afraid to do. But I think the scariest thing I ever did in my life was when I did stand-up comedy, because you die, but you're still alive.
That would definitely be scarier. That would definitely be scarier than doing that. But you know what? I've done radio since I was 15, but when I started this job and I was on the airwaves with Mark Vandermeer, who's the voice of the Texans, and I think we had like a player a week, so I had like Antonio Smith my first year every week. I thought, like, I'm going to be found out. They're going to be like, she doesn't know what she's talking about. It was very hard to get out of my own head sometimes, because I just didn't feel like, I'm around people that are phenomenal speakers. Like, I'm average in my workplace. Everyone's an amazing speaker. Mark Vandermeer is so smooth. He's so hilarious. And, it's hard to be confident when you're around people like that all the time, but I think it makes you better. You just have to, like you're saying, take that. I think that nervousness is adrenaline. It's like an adrenaline rush. And he told me, after he's called every single game in Texans history, he still gets butterflies before he calls each Texans game.
But Deepi, thank you again very much. It was very enjoyable. Appreciate it, and I hope to see you again in the future.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. Enjoy the rest of your meeting.
Thank you very much.
Alan Lipman, he's the one with my contact info, should anybody need it. I'd be happy to speak to you.
Everybody gets after Alan. Okay,
Okay,
thank you very much, Deepi.
Bye, Joe.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye. Okay, that was very enjoyable.